great to see everybody again, kind of, sort of. Hats off to you for enduring another day on the computer screen in the Zoomosphere. I think this is just really great, and I just look forward to seeing all of you in person. And just also wanted to shout out to Brad and Robbie and the others from Alaska who have been so great about coming down to our conference. It's a little bit earlier in the year, and we just really, really appreciate that relationship with the Alaska Farmers Market Association. And it always energizes us, and I hope is mutually beneficial. I wanted to start off with this picture today because it really embodies some of the theme today of building the future of farmers markets together. This was a incident in which a big market in Everett, Washington, had to move from their port location to a downtown location with only 2 weeks notice in July. And as you know, it's hard to move 3 blocks with 6 months planning. And so they were really scrambling. And so a lot of what was so great is that other market managers stepped up and came in and helped on that first day. And that's just a really important theme about why it's so important to work together. So with that, I'm going to click. And I wanted to start the presentation today talking about Doc and Connie Hatfield. Now, Doc and Connie Hatfield were the founders of Country Natural Beef. And I was at a presentation probably 15 years ago in Oregon, and something they said stuck with me that I think is relevant for today. And they were telling the story of how they got started. And so they had moved to the Bend, Oregon area around in the mid-'80s, and that was a really, really hard time for farming with the interest rates, and everybody was down on red meat, and they were having a really hard time. And a chance encounter in Bend, Oregon, Connie talks to this fitness guru, the Jack LaLanne of Bend, Oregon, and he says, gosh, I have a really hard time getting natural beef with no antibiotics, that's leaner, this is what we want. We're having a really hard time getting it from Argentina. And Connie's saying, but look, we're growing that right here in Oregon. And so that was her aha moment. And it led to about 34 ranchers from Oregon coming together to form a cooperative. And so not only were they having to work together, but they were also entering this direct sales market and getting closer to the customer and getting that customer what they wanted. And if you can imagine, in Central Oregon, a lot of independent rancher types aren't the usual cooperative suspects, right? That's not their natural inclination. These are tough, independent, John Wayne types. At any rate, what she said and how they got those 34 first families together was they realized that they had to work together to save their independence. And that, to me, resonates throughout our work as well. And I think, as you might agree, I think Alaska's maybe not so different, but a lot of farmers market vendors are kind of independent sorts. Now, tell me if I'm wrong. Maybe it's just unique here, but I don't think so. But let's think about it. They're entrepreneurs. They're self-starters. They work really, really hard. It's about their values and their personal choices as much as a job. And they can kind of sort of get attached to putting their own stamp on things from time to time. Not to mention being very attached to particular positions, sometimes just saying. So it's a really independent group of people that we work with. And they, and of course, this is probably true of a lot of farmers and artisans. This isn't unique to agriculture in general, but one big difference is in other sectors of agriculture, there's commodity commissions, there's marketing orders, there's marketing agreements, there's growers leagues, there's all kinds of infrastructure and systems to keep these independent entrepreneur farmers organized. And you know, typically it's around a commodity, but it's a way of making visible those group of farmers. In the farmers market world, I think our markets are incredibly important in terms of making visible this entire sector of direct marketing and local foods. They're an organizing entity and mechanism that bring together these independent creative entrepreneurs, and that's a very, very important role and part of the power of the farmers markets and what they offer to local foods, what they offer to direct marketing in general. And I think, as you might know, farmers markets can be fairly independent as well. They have their own personalities. They're deeply rooted within their community and reflecting what their community is all about, what they value, what's in their mission, the vendor mix, who's there, who the shoppers are, where the sites are, what the neighbors are. All of this is deeply rooted within particular communities. The irony is, for a lot of people, they kind of sort of look all the same. They feel the same. They have a similar culture. And so there's a great challenge out there for us is that the casual observer, the casual city mayor, the casual shopper, that all farmers markets are more or less the same. Well, I think we all know better. There's a lot of variety and a lot of independence within the markets themselves either. And so you have independent farmers and vendors mixing together with independent markets. And here we are today talking about working together. So how does that work? And what does that look like? And so if we took a bird's eye view here, this is Washington, and I'm sure Oregon and Idaho and British Columbia and Alaska, you know, could have similar maps. But from a bird's eye view, it might look very coherent, which is great. And that's part of our power and that's part of our strength. Whereas living in the details, living at the market level, living at the tent booth level, we know there's a lot of work that goes into making these bright, pretty pictures come together. There's a great Ethiopian saying, I'm sure you've come across it, and I always think of, which says that if you want to walk fast, walk alone, and if you want to walk far, walk together. And there's an interesting tension point within that in the farmers market world, in that we have a lot of independent folks who are on their own, fighting for their successes or their booth space, whatever the case may be. And yet we all need to walk together to really walk the distance. And so it's a very interesting challenge that we have here, that I'm hopeful that maybe some of the examples that we've experienced might come to bear and help you to see what your path looks like in Alaska. So we're going to circle back a little bit to the beginnings of the Washington State Farmers Market Association. It was founded in 1979, so last year was our 40th anniversary. And believe it or not, it wasn't founded to save the world or food systems. In 1979, farmers markets came together. Why? Because they needed insurance. So the story goes that the markets got together so they were able to access liability insurance. And so that was the start of the organization. And a lot has changed since then. But we have a few things that have come in handy being an older organization and an older association. We have a few traditions that have served us well. And I will say that records retention was not one of them. We have to scramble to find things, and there was no Dropbox in 1979, and so sometimes we have to kind of scramble to put together our history. So that's one tip for the younger associations: have a designated historian, because someday you're going to be telling your story, and you'll have better records. But I did find a few things to share with you, and this was one of the very first directories. And what's interesting to me is how much consistency there is. We're still looking across the state. We still are trying to educate folks about why it's important to shop at a farmer's market. And some of the reasons really resonate today. There's also fun out, talk to farmers, share recipes and ideas, reasonable prices for quality foods. That was probably more, well, we won't go into that. But a lot of things really resonate about why it's important to shop at a farmer's market, most importantly, to come face to face with the producer and to buy direct. There's also a fairly big headline here about what's sold at farmers markets. And that's interesting to think about, again, educating everybody, the public, shoppers, landlords, what a farmer's market means. And the Washington State Farmers Market Association adopted what's called our Roots Guidelines. And those are standards that define the vendor categories: farmers, processors, prepared foods, artisans, and resellers. Resellers are allowed if it's within the market policy, but they have to follow certain rules, such as being the only stop between the farm, having clear signage for transparency, and so on. And these Roots guidelines have really helped the association set the standards for what is a farmer's market, which is interesting and was very fortunate, because I think today's notion of what a farmer's market is even more claimed. It's claimed by anybody who has a street fair sometimes. It's claimed by, I've even seen a sign over the nursery section at the Home Depot. So everybody wants to be a farmer's market. But what is it? What is at that core? And how is it that we protect the integrity of the farmers markets for farmers, for those farm sales? And interesting, it will be a very interesting scenario these today, really thinking through who is it that's at the farmers markets when we have to really contain the vendor mix. And so these Roots guidelines, and they're available on the internet if you want to look at them, really help to set some of the standards, which we're very fortunate, because I think introducing it today, it might be a little different conversation. So we have that within our organizational expectations, our membership, and so on. And so today, if we look, oh, that's yesterday, flashback, now we're going to go forward. Today we have 110 member markets in around 80 cities throughout the state, 29 counties, so not every county, but most counties. And we can report at least on average around $55 million in sales. Sometimes it's a little bit more. And part of being an older organization is, part of the membership is we have a fairly extensive application process that serves as data collection for our association. And that was a wonderful gift in terms of being able to tell the story of farmers markets, being able to report out data to show that bigger picture, to inform it with numbers, not just stories. Both are important. And so because of that, we have a high percentage of markets that are collecting sales and reporting sales, which, going back to our theme of our independent entrepreneurs, sometimes that's a bit of a conversation. Sometimes there's markets with a philosophy saying none of your business. But we know that part of working together is being able to tell the story, be accurate, be credible, and have that bigger picture. The WSFMA as an organization, as you know, puts on an annual conference. We do programming around food access and have a contracted regional leads throughout the state. Those are funded by SNAP Ed contracts. Not the conference so much, but the food access work is funded by SNAP Ed contracts. We have shared promotions such as the directory and some of the website and some of the other pieces funded by grants and other smaller contracts, as well as providing member support through membership dues and so on. And so we've been able to leverage the membership dues in our organization to go out and get those larger contracts and grants so that we could provide more service. We're never able to provide everything every market needs, which is a challenge, but we have to be able to at least offer some quality services that are relevant for today. And part of working together within this notion is we also want to be able to, wait a minute, is to think about the who. Who is working together? Okay, we can start with our vendors and our market community and our landlords and our neighbors and the sponsors and the good folks that run the market. There's working together at that level. There's working together at the state level between all of the markets working together within the Alaska Farmers Market Association or the Washington State Farmers Market Association. We're working together as associations, but we also have to remember one of the strengths and potential foibles of farmers markets is there's so many points of entry. People are vested and care about supporting farms, the small business incubation, farmland, revitalization of community spaces, being a community spot that builds people together, the modern day town square. Fighting hunger has taken on more and more importance, and farmers markets play an incredibly important role in that, as well as eating healthy and bringing good food. So all of this richness that our farmers markets are rooted in also means that who is working together is vast. And it might mean new partners. It might mean thinking outside of who just shows up voluntarily, but who else would also care? And what does that look like? And so for us, our partnerships are really strong with our Department of Agriculture, with I mentioned the SNAP Ed work, with our Department of Social and Human Services, our Department of Health, our county agricultural programs. We don't have too many, but they've been very great partners, and so on. But I would love to have more partnerships. I would love to reach out more to land trusts and to tourism. And there's so much that we can be doing to work together to support farmers markets and the larger goals. So, so thinking through what that means for you might mean reaching out to somebody new. It might mean building off long-term relationships. It's an open field. And when we get into what do we mean by working together? That's where it gets a little, well, let me just say, that's where the rubber hits the road. And a lot of time it means meetings. And so what does that mean, that togetherness, that working together? It means talking together. It means spending time together. It means having the space and bandwidth and time to unpack things and repack them. And that's really, really challenging for small nonprofits that are usually funded based on outcomes, not on all of the activities to get there. And sometimes these meetings, you don't know what the outcome will be for years to come for a seed that's been planted in a particular meeting. And so we really need to think through, how do we fund, how do we make this time and space happen? And it's not there's no easy answer here. It really takes a commitment to work together. It also means that these conferences are really important. Using technology is really important, but also not using technology. Going and spending some time on a farm, learning something new, whatever it takes is not bonus. It's not extra. It's actually the work it takes to build our future together. And I'm going to put a special highlight on acronyms. And I think, see, this is very highfalutin, but very, very practical as well, because what we need to think about is how we use our acronyms. And acronyms can be both code for insider and also a barrier for others. And so we need to be patient with how much lingo we use and explaining what it means, both geographically in different contexts. Connie Hatfield back in Oregon, she had to take her ranchers from Bend, Oregon, and waltz over to Portland and talk to the folks at the cooperative and get them to see that they had something in common that was more important than their superficial differences, or maybe they were real deep differences, but they had to find ways to find that common bond, and it's work. And the language we use and the acronyms we use do matter, and so we need to really always be thinking about how can we make sure whoever we're inviting to the table is able to have the time to learn our culture, to learn our vocabulary, and so on. Now, you might be saying, what is Schnell's Funland have to do with this? And there's a sign, if you can see it in the screen, and it says Schnell's Funland. And I like signage. I'm a signage person. I care about good communication. And I just thought, I don't see Schnell and I don't see a Funland there. And so I think what I got from this is it's really important to have integrity with your communications and authenticity. We can't just put out there those labels, those buzzwords, that signage, unless we really know what's behind it and it has some meaning, and somebody's not going to drive by and say, I don't think so, not a Funland. I don't even know this Schnell. But what is it that we can be doing to keep and maintain our integrity and our authenticity as we work together? And it's no easy feat. So we've talked a little bit about what it takes to work together, about this building part, the hard work of what it takes organizationally, individually. And we also want to think about the future, but the future means different things to different people. And as of a month ago, it's been shifting under our feet. So I think we also need some patience in terms of really thinking through what that future might be. And it takes many, many shapes. And I think it's worth evaluating what our points of alignment are in terms of that future. And maybe we start at the market level, or maybe we start at the association, or maybe we build out with other partners. But I think there's a lot we can hold on to, and there's a lot that we maybe shouldn't take for granted. And I actually took this I pinched this from the internet, full disclosure. But I thought this was really important to think about too, is, we're now talking about trying to get back to normal, or what the new normal is. And what does that mean? What can we use this moment to transform that future? And I think that it's worthwhile to reflect on how we want that to align with our values, how we want to align with others as well, so that we're stronger and we go further together. So I'm just doing. So the key points here that I'm trying to convince you of is that this working together is not necessarily in contradiction with our independent entrepreneurial spirit, but it's a way to preserve it. It's a way to save it. It's a way to amplify it and to combat this disorganization within the direct marketing, free-spirited farming world so that we can really have that future that I think we all care about and be more impactful, whether it's collecting data or shared promotions or shared training. I'm so, tickled with the way our farmers markets are so eager to share common tools. And that's another key point, that it really does help to save everybody's independence if we're working together. I talked a little bit about meetings and funding and acronyms and the how and the where we meet. I think learning and thinking about how we do that matters. It is the work. It's not just a means to an end. So how can we do that, and how can we do that thoughtfully and with the future in mind? I think that I've mentioned shared tools, and so what's great about things like the Farmers Market Management Toolkit, which I hope Alaska can create for itself as well, is that the best thing that market managers say is they don't want to reinvent the wheel. And so what can we learn from others? And I think your conference has done that in spades. And so learning together is so crucial, in sharing what we've all learned. And Kat really spoke to that yesterday as well, in terms of thinking farmers markets are not in competition with themselves, but so much as competition with other retail outlets and other forms of marketing. So how we can be more coherent. And I would add within that something that I think about a lot, and that is really moving towards shared standards. And a little bit of that kind of gets embedded within our roots guidelines when we talk about what vendor categories mean, and how we collect sales or other information about markets, how we can unify the questions that are asked on a vendor application, anything that can help us to get more efficiencies that we desperately need when we have such lean organizations. So how can we make the markets operate more efficiently, but not just within that market, but between markets, as well as for the farmers that are participating in those markets. And so something as simple as being consistent with how information is asked for, or shared calendars, or one of the things that is incredibly challenging here is for vendors to know when the market application season opens. And we've been fussing around with that, trying to work on that a little bit in King County, which is where Seattle is, and trying to think through how it is that farmers can find farmers markets and know when the application are open and close and so on. And so something as simple as that, if we can work together to find a solution so that it's easier for vendors to find the markets, and it's easier for markets then to recruit the vendors by working together, it makes everybody's life easier, and we haven't sacrificed the personality and the independence of any player along the way. So so I think those shared standards is a real important way of working together. Another key piece is to simply stay organized. We are in a world of information overload and data overload, unless of course you're looking at farmers market data, and then it's kind of what then it's massively independent and particularistic, and it's kind of, there's studies here and studies there that are piecemeal, but how do we tell that larger piece, and how do we stay organized together? And I think exploring new technology, work, spending, allocating time, as well as those simple tools such as the directories or or online marketing, whatever form that takes. But that act of organizing is incredibly important, and it's also a great asset for our partners. When the Department of Agriculture can call you up and say, I need this message to get to all of the farmers markets, and you're there because you're organized and up to date, it's an incredible asset. It's an incredible piece of working together, and never ever underestimate the importance of that work of being organized and keeping in touch and having those good email lists or whatever it takes. And likewise, your market being so in touch with its shoppers. Those numbers, when we look at our membership and we ask for their shopper counts, if we add it all up, it's close to 7 million shoppers. Now, we don't, probably not all unique shoppers, but even if it were half of that, those are millions of touches, millions of interactions, and that power of distribution is incredible, an incredible asset. But it's only possible if we stay organized. And I just have two more tips here, and one is the importance of staying focused. Likewise, all of this richness, all of those carrot roots with all of these interests can really dilute our energy, and we don't have a ton of energy. And well, some of you have a ton of energy. Kat has a ton of energy. Robbie, tons of energy. Nevertheless, we need most of us are human and mortal and need to stay focused on what our mission is. And that's that future, and what are those essential pieces we need to get there. So while we're both expanding what that togetherness looks like, we also need to concurrently work on this piece about staying focused so that our most crucial tasks are taken care of. And that's not an easy thing for anybody I know in the farmers market world, because there's so many opportunities, and it's definitely something we need to be mindful of. And the last piece I just wanted to add in here is organizational and individual wellness. And I was glad to see you have some speakers coming up today talking about stress management and all of those good things. And it's incredibly important. And I think in farmers market sector, while we are so committed to building the future of farmers markets together, you're also building the future of food hubs and farmers and so many different things. And that's part of that staying focused and taking care of yourself as well. And that's no easy task, but market manager turnover is a really real challenge within our sector. So how do we keep people from burning out? How do we keep organizations from burning out? And think back to that picture of that tree by the river. It had like a thick trunk, and maybe half of it was still in the soil, but it was putting out green shoots. And that's amazing. But that's a tough row to hoe. And so how do we get all of the roots in the ground so that all the green shoots can come up, and that we can stay well organizationally and individually. So with that, I just wanted to acknowledge that the work of building farmers markets together takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of empathy, and it's really inspiring to be with all of you today and to be part of what's going on in our